And welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Michel Bryant, in for the well-rested, or he will be when he comes back, Jesse Weber. Joseph Carey on the stand. He is the defendant, Nicole Nachtman's brother, half-brother, same mom, different dad. And now he's undergoing cross-examination in which the focus clearly seems to be what was going on in the household. What did you know about how Nicole was being treated by your mom? With me now, back on the show, I'm glad to have back Matthew Maddox, criminal defense attorney. Matthew, thank you for joining me. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
Very good, sir. So this morning, we heard on direct exam this witness basically say that the defendant admitted to killing the two adults in this case, Miriam Deans and Robert Deans, their natural mother and the stepfather. Now, where are we going with all this testimony that the defense is ferreting from this guy?
Well, look, they're trying to lay that groundwork. They're trying to establish a history here that builds on this narrative about this defendant being subject to abuse and living in fear, and that's a long process of building that one block after building block after building block, right?
Yeah, you know, she pointed out a couple of things. She said you left home because you were older and could take it. At the time, Nicole was only 2 or 3, so obviously she could not leave. We haven't really heard about physical abuse. It just seems to be more verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and not that that's a good thing, but does the jury need to hear more?
I think this jury is going to need to hear a lot more. I mean, this is a murder. This is, you know, as I understand it, this woman left college, came home, is alleged to have shot her parents. I think they're going to need a lot more dramatic and I think probably physical abuse, something akin to terror in that household for that narrative to ring true.
Yeah, and it seems to me that if you're looking for some sort of imminent threat that they're battling, if you're a battered child and the self-defense is because you're fearing some imminent threat, you know, at the very least, she's 4 hours away at school. Maybe she could suggest that, hey, the school thing wasn't working out. I'm going to end up back in the home. And if that's the case, I can't take it. I fear for my life. Do you buy that?
I think that drive home is a real problem. You know, we're in some type of a mental disease or defect offense, insanity defect, you're really looking at something that's much more spontaneous, much more sudden. And that long drive points toward premeditation, Michael, and that's a problem here.
Yeah, it's hard to use the word snap when you're driving 4 hours from Tallahassee down to the Tampa area. Okay, stay with me, Matthew. We got much more to talk about. We're going to take a quick break here at the Law and Crime Network. Back to the case against Nicole Nachtman when we return. Joseph Carey on the stand, in this case out of Florida, talking about his sister, Nicole Nachtman, the defendant. And the picture we're getting is, you know, kind of an emotional childhood. The times he recalls her being bullied and mom fat-shaming her. Is it all going to be enough, though, to support a defense of self-defense? Or, well, we haven't heard any insanity stuff yet. Matthew Maddox is with me, criminal defense attorney. I want to ask a question about kind of a bigger picture question, Matthew. This is a multiple murder case. There are 2 charges of first-degree murder. And in Florida, more often than not, that means, you know, we're talking death penalty. But we're not. They initially tried to factor that into the mix, but at some point said, no, we're not. We're going for life without the possibility of parole. What is their thinking on that?
Well, it makes you wonder whether the prosecution hasn't itself somehow bought into some type of even mild mitigation, at least, Michael, about what this defendant's childhood looked like. That's what makes me wonder. They're not looking for the death penalty. Were they anticipating that, given, even if it isn't a defense of insanity, is there enough mitigation there that death wouldn't probably end up being the result on a sentence regardless? That's my question.
That's what I thought. And so I wanted to look into what the state was suggesting was the reason they dropped it. And here was the quote that I found here. The state attorney says, quote, "I seek the death penalty in cases so heinous, atrocious, and so undeserving of mercy as to be considered the worst of the worst in our society," end quote. So, I mean, if we talk about the facts of this case, let's ignore the defense for a moment. The facts of this case, the planning, the apparent lying in wait to kill the second victim, the mother. I mean, seems to me those words like atrocious and merciless, you know, they seem to fit.
And you know, Michael, I think that Florida certainly has, and certainly other states' attorneys have prosecuted and sought the death penalty under similar general allegations. So certainly, I think it's good to hear a state's attorney saying, that we only seek the death penalty in circumstances where the evidence is atrocious and heinous, but it makes you wonder whether there isn't something behind that that has to do with the history of this defendant and what they think would have happened at sentencing regardless.
Yeah, perhaps just kind of hedging their bets if the insanity defense has any real legs. Okay, stand by, Matthew. More to talk about here. We are going to be back in that Florida courtroom. Don't forget, we're also in the Rosenbaum verdict watch. They're pushing 7 hours now in that case, which has 49 counts against the defendants. Back in just a moment to the Law&Crime Network. Okay, this is fascinating. Now, this was obviously a jailhouse videotaped interview at some point after she was incarcerated. And you can just tell by her demeanor that, you know, maybe she's not handling this the way a quote, normal person might. Matthew Maddox with me here, criminal defense attorney. What's your take on this?
Fascinating is absolutely right. Look, she's her demeanor and her tone is like she's on holiday. That she's, you know, she's taking some time off and she's getting some good food and not such a bad experience for her. What I found fascinating already, though, in the defense direction here, Michael, is are they after a sudden snapping, or are they after a history of mental illness? Is it schizophrenia? Is it schizoaffective disorder? You know, we've dealt with these types of cases in our office, and if that's what you are pursuing, then this type of footage and hopefully some clinical information later, I think would make this a much more understandable narrative to a jury.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably see that coming along. I know the audio is difficult to pick up there, folks. We apologize for that. We're doing the best we can with the technology and the original recording. But there was one thing she said that I think was critical and very telling. She said, quote, "I have no problem looking in the mirror," end quote. That tells me, Matthew, that there's been maybe a history of shaming for this girl, that, you know, that she's been told, you know, take a look at yourself. What do you think of that? You know, and now she's in this situation. She's okay with herself in the mirror. What do you think?
I just think it's a compelling, seemingly spontaneous, unsolicited comment about what, in a bizarre way, but you know, it's compelling. It's very moving in a sense that here she is incarcerated, and seemingly her quality of life and the way she perceives herself has improved.
Okay, let's take a quick break here while they're continuing to play out that video. We'll keep monitoring it. Be back in that courtroom in just a few moments. This is the Law&Crime Network. So that was a telling little tidbit there at the end where he said, "We love you," and then he corrected himself to say, "I love you." This is the brother, Joseph Carey, with the defendant on a phone conversation there at the jail outside of Tampa. Boy, Matthew Maddox here with me. We've talked a little bit about, you know, the impression this video is making. I thought she was going to ask for the concierge at some point. I can't get the concierge to get another blanket. She seems like she's in a hotel, but remember, the prosecution is putting this on. What's the point here?
Well, if the prosecution wants the jury to see this, this reminds me of what I was thinking while I'm watching and listening, Michael, is, you know, I've been visiting people in prisons for 28 years, and there were two categories of people who behave like this young woman does when they're incarcerated. One is the type who is really mentally ill. And I thought another telling question from the brother is, or point from the brother is, I don't want you to go crazy in there. That's a little bit ironic. But then the other category, Michael, is the individual who is just absolutely cold-blooded, has no feeling and no sense of remorse. And if I'm a prosecutor, that's what I want to take out of this video.
Yeah, well, stand by, Matthew. We're going to find out, because when we come back from our little break here, we believe this witness will be on cross-examination, and certainly the conversations had with the defendant, Nicole Nachtman, will be front and center. Stay right where you are. Coming back to the Law&Crime Network.